Good afternoon. You are joining Montgomery College's 2020 Census Facebook Live FAQ. My name is Nick Sushka, and I'm joined here today with two of our student census ambassadors. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Avery.
I'm Mel.
Great. So Avery, Mel, I'm really excited that we're going to be able to have this conversation today to help all of our viewers who are following along learn more about the 2020 census. Let's start with probably a really important question. What is the 2020 census? Avery, why are we doing this?
Well, once every 10 years, the government does a count of everyone in America, regardless of nationality or original nationality, regardless of your citizenship. It's just everyone gets counted.
So every 10 years, federal government does the decennial census, and we are trying to count every person who lives in the United States, right?
100% yes.
Okay, great. So Mel, why is the census important?
It's an allocation of funds, and it decides who gets what, basically, and where. That's the basic gist of it.
No, pretty straightforward. It's a way that we divide up the funding in the United States.
Yeah.
Okay. Avery, what else makes the census so important every 10 years?
Well, one of the main things that is also with the census is the allocation of representatives in the House of Representatives. It changes all the time based on how much population each state has. And that's a very important thing, because if you're not counted in the census, then you will lose out on the opportunity to have your voice heard in the legal system, in the political system.
So really it comes down to money and power or representation, right, and the ability to sort of fund your community's needs, right? So I know that we are expecting more than $675 billion to be allocated based on the 2020 census. What are some of the things that that funding is used for?
A large part of it is everyday services that we take for granted existing, like, for example, the public library, public school system, public buses, police and fire departments. All of it is funded primarily based off of who gets what in the census.
Yeah.
In addition to that, there's also free and reduced meals in schools, which is really important for communities of low income. And
yeah, so public services, really important immediate needs that our local community, families, children all benefit from. Based on what you've been learning as census ambassadors, how might people not being counted here at Montgomery College affect us? What are some of the things that census funding actually helps us to provide?
One of the big things is probably going to be Montgomery College itself. We as a community have access to all these great services that Montgomery College provides for us across 3 campuses. So technically 4 if you count the online students as well, and we do.
Because everyone counts.
Exactly, everyone does count. But for every single person that's not counted, it's something around $20,000 for the entire 10-year period if they don't get counted.
Yeah.
And that loss to the community is massive,
Yeah.
not just for the individual, but also for everyone else.
Yeah, I was attending recently a briefing at the county council about what Montgomery County has been doing, and one of the things they talked about was that we are one of the, I guess you could call us one of the best jurisdictions for the count. We do have a high complete number, but 20% is what we were undercounted in 2010. So 20%, and as you said, every person not counted in Maryland, we're estimating about $18,250 over 10 years, right? So if 20% of our community, we have over 1 million people in Montgomery County, so that's going to be 200,000 people that don't get counted. Maybe our viewers at home could help us do that math, but we're talking about millions of dollars. And so we do know that it's really important that every single person is counted. Let's talk about who needs to respond to the census. So we know that it's every human, but sometimes people still don't realize they have the right to complete the census. So here at Montgomery College, who are we talking about? Who needs to complete the census? Mel?
I actually live in one of the underrepresented areas, Glenmont, and that area is highly populated with immigrants and just minority communities who are kind of skeptical on the fact that the census might ask for their citizenship status or for their social security, and so there's a lot of distrust in the form, and there's a lot of distrust in the government, which leads to people not responding and not filling out those forms. So I think just us targeting like minority groups in order for them to have this information and know that the census is very safe and it's not going to ask you those questions is really important. And also emphasizing the fact that like everyone counts, including children under 5 years old, that some people might forget about, or they think it's not important, but they also need funds because there's things such as like preschool programs that need to be funded, and that's important for those groups.
Yeah, definitely. People who have recently moved to the country, immigrants. You mentioned that question about social security numbers or citizenship status, and certainly we know there were a lot of questions leading up to the 2020 census. Would that be on the form? Would it not be on the form? We know it's definitely not on the form, right? The census will not ask anyone those questions, and the reason for that is because we want to ensure everyone trusts the census and everyone completes the form. Who else here at the college, Avery, would you want to make sure knows that, yes, they too need to be counted?
Well, I'm going to say a lot of people who are just unsure whether or not they should take the census, mainly people who are not citizens of this country, here legally or illegally or just in general. A lot of people don't understand that they can just take the census and that they should, because it's good for the community. Even if you're going to only be here for like the next couple of months and, you know, at the end of the semester you're gone, it still helps the community and it still helps you in the long run as well, because if you come back or if you move, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so we talked about this quite a bit in our team meetings, right? We have a lot of international students here at the college who might think, you know, I'm studying here on an F1 visa. Am I supposed to be counted? And the answer is absolutely yes, right? So it's every person who is going to count where they sleep and live a majority of the time, right?
Yes.
So that brings us to, what day are we supposed to be thinking of in our minds? When should people be aware the census form is going to be mailed, right, a postcard in mid-March, and people are going to be invited to start filling out the census? There's 3 different ways they can fill it out. Mel, how can people respond to the 2020 census?
In the past, it's always been by mail or by phone, but this is the first time that it's online also. And it's also available in different languages for people who don't speak English.
Yes.
So.
Absolutely. So lots of resources.
Yes.
And as you noted, for the first time ever, people can go online and fill it out. And then, Avery, do you recall which day it is that we're all kind of across the country hoping to fill it out? What day is that?
Well, April 1st is the basic day. It's also another important day because on a basic level, any child that was born on or after April 1st should not be counted in the 2020 census. They would be counted in 2030, but that's a decade from now.
Right.
But everyone, even if you were born a second before April 1st, get counted. It's important.
Yeah. And the census form, it has 10 basic questions, right? And so it kind of helps easily guide people through that question of, you know, how many children are living in your household? When were they born? If they were born after this date, they should be counted. So we're really hoping that by April 1st, everyone will have either gone online or made that phone call or begun to fill out the paper form, because that is when we're going to try to count every person who is living in the United States, right? Okay, great. So if people don't fill out the census form by April 1st, what happens? What should they be doing next?
Well, there's the opportunity to go online still or request paper copies still and go, of course, over the phone. But in the end, if you don't go and attempt to fill out the census, the federal government will send their census representatives out to every single home that they can find that has not been counted already. And they're basically just going to knock on doors until they get their questions answered. Eventually, every person should be counted, regardless of, you know, where you live, who you are, what your immigrant status is, and even in the end, if you even have a home.
Right.
Everyone should be counted.
Right. And I know we've been able to learn a lot from people who are working for the Census Bureau about how they do try to count folks who aren't living in an apartment or a house that they own or lease, right? And so every household is going to be trying to count all of the people that live in their household, but then other places like residence halls at college campuses, or people who are living in senior assisted living centers, or even, as you note, people who might be living in a homeless shelter or in other temporary housing. The effort is being made to make sure they're counted as well, right? So, Mel, you mentioned that there are some communities that might not trust that the census is safe for them to fill out. Can you share a bit more about what you as an ambassador have been doing to try to take that message into different communities?
Well, when we were giving out surveys to see how much people actually knew about the census, I ran into a few students who stopped me before I even handed them the survey and were like, I'm not even a legal resident. I don't know if I can fill this out. And I was like, no, it's not asking you to vote. It's not asking you to do, because that's what they thought, that's what that form was. And I said, no, this is just to count everybody in the U.S. And they were still like, well, I'm not technically counted. And I was like, but you are. It doesn't matter what your status is. It doesn't matter where you live. If you live here a majority of the time, then you should be counted in the U.S. Census. And I had to keep having that conversation with several students. So it's clear to me that that's a huge issue and a huge, I guess, just question that these communities have. And it doesn't just pertain to themselves, it also pertains to their families. And then those families have friends or extended family that will also have that same question. And it might not have been answered had I not answered that student's question. So I think just even educating students at MC about that is gonna have a much bigger impact on the population.
Yeah, I know that's kind of our theory, right, is that we're gonna reach the people that we see every day in the classroom and in the cafeteria, and that we're taking online classes with, and just trying to have these conversations with people about, have you heard of the 2020 census? Do you know who's supposed to fill it out? And then trying to answer those questions. With that survey that you all were trying to get out around campus as ambassadors at the beginning of the semester, I know one of the questions we asked was true or false. You'll have to have a social security number or U.S. citizenship to fill out the census. And we had about a third of people say true, right? And we had to educate, and we had on the survey there, no, false, absolutely not. You're giving basic information, first and last name, date of birth, and then race and ethnicity as you identify. And it's just a short 10 questions that really ensures that that funding and that political representation gets to every community. Yeah. So what else have you all been doing as census ambassadors? What have been some of the ways that you've been getting the word out? Avery?
Well, I'm pretty sure my style has always been more of the forceful, blunt approach. Honestly, I kind of just, so I run a couple clubs on campus, and I'm part of a couple other clubs.
Yeah. Which clubs are you a part of here at MC?
Well, I'm part of the chess club at Germantown campus. I'm a floating member of the history club at Germantown campus. I run the philosophy, ethics, and politics discussion group at Germantown as well. Primarily Germantown, obviously. And I am also on the, and I'm also the leader of the MCRPG club at Germantown. And
have you had the chance to talk with club members about the 2020 census?
Basically yelled at them about it. Basically, we have a Discord server, and I go online a lot, and I tell them, check out this thing, go on this survey, do these things, follow the QR codes. And I get about half the people to do it, which is still a good 75 people. That's something. And also during clubs, I also tell them about it as well, and just randomly in the hallways as well. It's just basically whenever you can fit it in.
So really leveraging those personal relationships that you have, and talking to those club members, and just really emphasizing the importance of it. We're going to talk more when we come back from the break about other ways that you have been able to do outreach here through the Census Ambassadors Program. Thank you, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
It's all about power and money. Almost $700 billion per year.
And it only happens once every 10 years.
It directly impacts our representation in government
and the money that goes to our communities,
our schools,
our housing,
our neighborhood programs,
our lives.
So what is it?
The census.
a population count of America. But it's much more than that.
It's the basis of distributing power and money
From the government to our communities.
The unfortunate part is that a lot of us aren't counted.
And it's on us to change that.
When we aren't counted, our communities don't get their fair share.
For each person not counted, their community loses out on over $20,000 over 10 years. For a household or a family of 5, that community loses out on over $100,000.
But we can change it.
When the census comes in the mail,
Fill it out. Don't throw it out. Or do it online.
And make sure you count everyone in the household.
Little ones too.
Little ones too.
The census begins in 2020.
Most households will get a postcard in the mail next March.
telling them it's census time.
And we're required to fill it out.
The count should be used to determine how many congresspersons each state gets.
And to draw new congressional maps in 2021.
It's also used to draw maps for basically every level of government.
From the state legislature to school board. So this is a huge opportunity for us
to make a direct impact on our communities.
It's critical that we are all counted.
So go ahead, take the pledge.
Pledge to be counted.
Pledge to be counted.
Pledge to be counted.
Because there's too much at stake not to.
I count.
I count.
I count.
I count.
I count.
We count.
Contamos. We count.
We count.
نحن محسوبين.
We count.
Welcome back from the break. We've been joined now by a student who is doing outreach through the Ambassador Program on the Tacoma Park campus. So would you like to introduce yourself, please?
My name is Kemi, and I'm a current Montgomery College student, and I'm a Census Ambassador.
Ah, great. So thanks for joining us, Kemi. And Mel is still here with us, who's been doing most of your outreach on the Rockville campus, right? Mm-hmm. So Mel, can you tell us a little bit more about what you have been doing as a Census Ambassador?
Yeah, so I've taken more of a hands-on approach. It's just kind of more my style. With tabling, which just means that you set up a table like somewhere that's highly trafficked. So I do it near the bookstore, and I was handing out surveys while also giving incentives like cotton candy or other food, because students love free food. And I kind of like that more because it's more of like a personal conversation, and you can answer their questions right then and there that they have. And usually when you have those incentives, they're more likely to ask you questions and actually stop and listen to what you have to say about the census. And I feel like even if maybe it was not as big of a group that I was getting to, it was more in depth than just like posting something or just like sending something out, which for some people that does work, and for some people it's really, really good. But for me, I prefer having that personal conversation.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of these questions that people have are personal, right?
Yeah.
So being able to take some time to really talk to people about their questions and their concerns is really important. Kemi, what has been your approach to talking to people about the 2020 census?
Currently, I'm a Montgomery College Student Senate, and they always organize events on campus just to get people social. And I go to the events on campus just to share the flyers or secure a table for census and to give incentives out to people. And also to clubs on campus. Currently, I'm in the African Student Association. So on the group chat, I'll send the census survey to please let everyone fill the survey and watch the video to know more about the census.
Great. Yeah, I think both of you have such an opportunity through your leadership positions and your volunteering in the community to be that trusted messenger. But we talked a bit about why people might not right away trust the 2020 census. So Mel, why should people trust that they should be a part of this effort?
Because the census doesn't share any of your information, and if someone from the census would, they would be faced with a jail time and also a huge fine. So it's not really worth it for them. I'm not sure if like that's helpful, but for me, like that helps me because I know a lot of people like you can't. It's a big fine. I don't exactly remember how much, but it's more than what's worth sharing information. It's just very confidential. Like their information is safe.
So for you, that understanding that there's laws that protect the data and that census workers would definitely be held accountable, and there's not an incentive to share it. Kemi, what about you? What makes you think that the 2020 census is a process that should be trusted?
Because your personal data is confidential. They won't ask you for any personal info like your bank account, your social security, or they're not going to collect any money from you. It's totally free.
Yeah, so they're not asking questions that they might ask, for instance, when you fill out your taxes, right? You're getting a lot more personal information when you fill out your taxes, and in this case, we're sometimes getting even more money back for our communities than maybe you would with your tax return, right? I think for me, it was actually looking at the census form and seeing those 10 questions and just how basic and simple they were, and knowing that all of that information is anonymized and the data can't be shared in any kind of personal way with any other government agency, and that it's really not a political process. It's something that's happened every 10 years since 1790, right, since the beginning of the country really trying to do this process. You know, one of the things we've talked about in the Census Ambassadors Program is that everyone has rights, everyone has resources, everyone has responsibilities. So we have the right for our data to be protected, we have the right to fill it out, we have the right to get counted. What are some of the resources that are available to help people, though? Kemi? For filling out the form, where can people go if they need assistance or they need more information?
They could call by phone, they could go online, and for Montgomery College students, they could seek out resources from the Census Ambassadors, and there's like an upcoming Census Festival, and they could also come there too.
Right, so we've got in-person, we've got people they can talk to, resources online. Mel, what other resources do you think are important for people to be aware of?
If someone doesn't have internet access at home, or they just don't have a laptop or computer, they can actually go to, I believe, public libraries and also Montgomery College libraries to fill out the census form there, and that will be available like after April 1st.
Great, great. So yeah, people could go to the college website and they could see that sample form, right? So we have a census website here at MC, and there's the language resources you mentioned, Mel, and then they could make a phone call if they want to talk through the form or they have questions. And then you both mentioned that we're doing some events right here on all 3 of our campuses, right? So on April 1st and April 4th, we'll open up our libraries, and we'll have people who will be available to help people log in if they don't have internet access or they just prefer to have a helping hand through the process. And then our census festivals. So Kemi, what's going to be happening at our census festivals?
The Census Festival is where students come in to libraries to fill out the census. So just to get, if they don't have internet access at home, they could go to the library to fill out the census. People, like the Census Ambassadors, is going to be there to help out.
And what else can people expect if they come to those census festivals, Mel? What else will we be doing? How do we throw a festival here at MC?
Lots of fun, lots of prizes, lots of food. So lots of things that people like on this campus will be provided.
Great, great. So we know that we'll have one festival on each campus. April 21st, we'll be up at Germantown. April 22nd, we'll be at Rockville. April 23rd, we'll wrap it up at Tacoma Park, Silver Spring. So lots of opportunities for people to actually come and fill out their census form right on the spot and make sure that they get counted, right? Great, great. So in terms of people that we know that are maybe hesitant to fill out the form or wouldn't know to fill out the form, what are you all going to be doing in the next couple of months to get the word out? What are some other things you're working on as ambassadors?
Right now we're working on one-on-one presentations and also group presentations. And the group presentations would entail us going to like clubs or just spreading the word that we're going to be in this room at this time, and come if you want to learn about it. There will be food for you if you come. And that would just be like educating on like the personal, like in-person level. And then right now we're also working on a goal towards like a social media informational discussion, I guess. We're kind of in a contest of like seeing who can get the most like retweets or reposts on social media to get the word out. It's also like we're a little competitive, so it's like helpful for us too.
So participating in this discussion today might be giving you a little advantage
when
you go to compete in the social media contest. Okay. And Kemi, you're doing a presentation later today about the census, right? Who will you be meeting with?
So we'll be meeting with the Student Senate college-wide meeting, meeting with Ms. Jenny, the current student, the college-wide dean of student affairs, and we'll have a presentation at the Student Senate meeting just to let people know about the census and why to take the census.
Great, great. So you're meeting with administrators, you're meeting with employees, and then you're also meeting with students, just inviting anyone to have a presentation or a one-on-one meeting, and then reaching people digitally too. Oh, that's really great. That's great. So one of the things that we have heard that some people are concerned about is fraud or scams, or just making sure that they're getting the official census information. And so one of the things we want to make sure people know is that, as you put it, Kemi, it's free, right? You don't have to pay any money to fill out the census. So if anyone were to call you up and say that you needed to send in a form, or you need to send in money to get the census, that would be an obvious scam, right? Avery earlier mentioned that if people don't go online or make the phone call or fill out the form, by about the end of April, people will start to come around and knock on doors. So what would your advice be to people if they want to make sure that they're following a trusted process and they're avoiding people knocking on their doors or coming around to their houses? What should they do to make sure that that doesn't happen?
If they want to avoid people coming to their doors, fill it out by April 1st. And if you don't want to deal with people in person, you're just not that type of person, then do it online on the census website. So that way you know that it's legit and not some scam.
Yeah. And there is an official census website, right? 2020census.gov, and that will be where the postcard that every household gets will direct them to. So as you put it, they're going to be going to a trusted website, and they can fill it out that way. Or if they don't trust electronic forms, they can mail in the paper form just like they have for every other census before. Okay, good. And then the people who do come around and knock on doors, those folks are official census workers, right? So they would have an official ID badge, and they would be introducing themselves with their photograph and that Department of Commerce watermark where the Census Bureau is located. So should someone come around knocking, they're going to have obvious credentials, and then they're going to be asking those basic questions, right? Not financial information, not for Social Security numbers. So we know that, right? Okay, great. So this is kind of an easy question. I think I know your answer, but should you fill out the census? Are you two planning to make sure your households do?
Definitely.
Okay. So what kind of conversations have you had with the people you live with about the 2020 census?
I just told them that, I'm a census ambassador, and April 1st, the census form will be coming out to each houses. So Dad, Mom, you have to fill out the census, and if you can't do it, I can help you do it.
That's great. So even though you may not be the head of household, you're kind of taking the leadership and saying, if you need help, I'm here, but I'm going to make sure you fill it out. What about you, Mel?
My immediate family is pretty familiar with the whole process, but I do have a mixed status family. So those who are not as comfortable because they're not a citizen or a legal resident, I've been talking to them about it, and I told them that I would help them also fill it out. And I've showed them like sample forms of it just to like make sure they know that question is not on there. And through that, like it's instilled a lot more confidence, I think, in them to fill it out, and also to tell their friends who also might share their status that that question's not on there and that it's okay to fill it out, and it's important to fill it out because we need those funds.
Yeah, great. So it just sounds like the outreach you're doing to your families and to your fellow students is just so powerful. And we know that for MC students, we're talking about federal student loans, the Pell Grants, research grants, as Avery said earlier, campus funding, and so many programs in our community, right? Public transportation, where hospitals are located, and everyone has that right to help participate. And I'm just so thankful for the work that you're both doing to help take that trusted message into so many different places. It'll be exciting to see if, when we get the data back after the 2020 census, if Montgomery County is still one of the highest counted communities in the country. Great for us. And some of the harder to count census tracts, like you mentioned, around Glenmont, Aspen Hill, East County, if we are able to make a difference. I'm really hoping that we see that 20% number come down, and we make sure that everyone is counted in the 2020 census. Is there anything you want to say before we sign off on our conversation today? Any last message you think people really need to hear?
I don't think so. I think we pretty much talked about it all.
Just to make sure that April 1st is in less than a month.
Yes.
So
the countdown is here, right? Okay, great. So I think that you're going to do a great job getting that message out, and hopefully the folks who've been following along at home were able to get some really valuable information today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So we'll be having future Facebook FAQ discussions in languages like Spanish and French, Amharic, and Vietnamese. So we really hope you'll help get the word out, and let us know if you have any other questions about the 2020 census.